Welcome to Leading with Empathy and Allyship, where we have deep, real conversations to build empathy for one another and to take action to be more inclusive and to lead the change in our workplaces and communities. I'm Melinda Brianna Epler, founder and CEO of Change Catalyst and author of How to Be an Ally. I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion speaker, advocate, and advisor. You can learn more about my work and sign up to join us for a live recording at ally.cc. All right, let's dive in. So, welcome to our Change Catalyst live event series and the Leading with Empathy and Ally show, where we have deep, real conversations about how we can all be more inclusive in our workplaces and our communities, really lead the change. I'm Melinda Brianna Epler, author of How to Be an Ally and founder and CEO of Change Catalyst, where we build inclusive innovation through training, consulting, coaching, and events. Happy Black History Month. And also happy Black Lunar New happy Lunar New Year as well. I want to start off Black History Month. We really wanted to have a conversation that goes beyond the basics, beyond diversity and recruiting. While recruiting is important, many companies start there, end there, and we really want to make sure that we're going deeper. So that's what we're going to talk about today, strategies for supporting Black leadership in the workplace, with Tonita Webb, who's the CEO of Verity Credit Union, and William A. Adams, who's the technical advisor to the CTO at Microsoft. So welcome, both of you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before we dive in on screen, I just want to say a couple of things about our interpreters and our captioning on screen. We have ASL interpreters Sarika and Jen, who will be tag teaming the interpretation from Interpreter Now, and you can learn more about them at interpreter-now.com. Would you just join me in describing ourselves for anybody who's blind or low vision or on the phone? I'll start. I'm a white woman with red hair, wearing black and white glasses and a black long sleeve blouse. And behind me is a table with a couple plants and my book, How to Be an Ally.
This is William. I'm a black male with silver gray, black, balding head, and other than that, very handsome. And my room behind me is decorated with too many monitors to count.
As a good engineer should.
As a good engineer should.
I am a Black woman with medium length hair. It's reddish brown at the moment. So that'll let you know it's always that color. And behind me, I have a TV monitor because I love noise, and a picture that a friend gave to me that says life, to remind me how precious life is.
All right. So Tonita and William, we always start with getting to know you more about you personally. So if you could just start by saying a bit about your story. Where did you grow up? How did you come to do the work you do today?
Anita, please go.
Sure. I grew up in Southeast Virginia in the Hampton Roads area. I grew up in a single parent home. I'm the oldest of three kids. And my mom, unfortunately, when I was about 5, was diagnosed with lupus. So most of my childhood was her struggling with her illness. And oftentimes my siblings and I had to go live with one of her sisters because she was too ill to take care of us. I grew up in low-income housing, and a picture that was not encouraging for me to really do anything positive. But one of the things I gleaned from my mom as she struggled with lupus is this faith and this desire to keep going forward. And I knew I did well in school, so that was kind of my ticket out as I saw it. And I went to undergrad at Hampton University, and I wish I could say I had it all figured out. I didn't. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I decided to go into the Air Force. And I was a police officer in the Air Force, just kind of fell into that. And the Air Force is what got me out here to Seattle. And we lived in Seattle for about 4 or 5 years and left and lived in Key West, Florida. And that's where I got introduced to human resources. And I realized that was kind of it for me, people, understanding the humanity in people. I left out when I went to Hampton, I was an engineer major because I did well in math and science, and everyone said that's what I was supposed to do. Mm-hmm. But I am kind of an extreme extrovert and chatty Cathy, and that just didn't work well in what I was studying. So I switched gears to business. My husband and I decided to leave Florida and make Seattle our home. And I worked in various industries. And after having my last kid, which I'm a mom of 4, and I put him in preschool, I decided to go back to work. And it was at a credit union as an HR manager. And I was just hooked because this was my opportunity to help people on a deeper level. All of us at one point in time have thought about finances, worried about finances, and I was able to see up close and personal the inequities in finances. And so I learned everything I needed to know within the credit union industry. And you fast forward 16 years, and today I get to serve as Verity CEO. Wow. That was my life in a snapshot. And then I'm going to hand it over to you. Well,
quite a snapshot. My name is William A. Adams, and I grew up in Southern California in a town called Placentia, which you can't even see the dot on the map. It's like at the very northern edge of Anaheim, which is Disneyland. So I grew up around, at that time, there was a strange juxtaposition of orange fields, strawberry fields, and Rockwell International. So we were, our neighborhood itself we would call it the barrio, which is it's the neighborhood, this is the hood. This is not hardcore, Compton or something like that, but this is migrant workers, families, just working families. And it was a split between, there's a freeway that was put in between our neighborhood when I was younger. And all the Mexicans were on one side and all the Black families were on the other side. And we were on the Mexican side. So I grew up with Carlos Santana and, speaking Spanish and stuff like that. It was a roughish neighborhood, but not too rough. I mean, it was rough enough that the police didn't come around unescorted. And there's some kids that were in jail or older kids that were in jail, but, it wasn't like shootings on the street and rampant drugs and all that sort of stuff. Just people trying to, raise their kids. My father died when I was 7. So I was, as Tonita was telling her story, I was like, hey, there's some similarities here. I'm one of 3 children. I'm the youngest, the baby. And, so from when I was 7 onward, it was just my mom raising us. Mm-hmm. And the only real thing she said to us was, look, if you go to jail, I'm not bailing you out. So don't end up in jail. But I had I was a precocious little kid, and I just did my thing. And I was into my chemistry kit and my electronics kit and my construction kit. And I did all that, and I did sports, and I was just into my thing. And eventually we moved to another place down the street. And I eventually got a personal computer from my uncle. And that was the beginning of my career in tech. Really, it was just growing up at the time when Apple Computer was becoming Apple Computer, and the IBM PC was becoming the IBM PC, and I was getting into programming, and I was hooked, right? So I was, that was when I was 12, I taught myself how to code when I was 12. And there was just a series of things after that. I went to UC Berkeley. I started a company with my brother in software development. We did all sorts of stuff in Silicon Valley, which I won't go into, but I ended up at Microsoft in 1998. And I've just had a series of shipping software and doing killer things like, oh, we're going to hire more women and minorities. It's time to do that now. and setting up programs to do exactly that and hire hundreds of women and minorities over the last few years. And I just keep going. It's like I help pull us into creating development centers in Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and presently I'm doing the same for the Caribbean. It's like, we need to be there. So, that's what I do. It's always a mix of humane things and code. I've never stopped coding.
Awesome. Thank you both for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Just one more thing.
Oh, yeah.
She said extreme extrovert. I would say I'm not an extreme introvert, but I'm on the opposite end.
This is going to be fun there.
I love it. I'm an introvert as well. So there we are. So as you grew into your leadership roles, but what support has been really valuable to you along the way? Support from allies, support from folks along the way, and maybe also what additional support could you have used that you didn't receive?
You want to start with either one of us?
Go ahead, William.
All right, I'll go.
Yeah.
I would say it's kind of a trick question, because as much as we might feel alone and the only in many situations, the truth is we're always supported, even when we're in the middle of the battle. I've personally had all along my journey. So my very first support was my uncle, who gave me my first computer. Right. And there were mentors around that I recognize now, that I didn't understand what mentors were when I was younger, but I recognize now as like, oh, the podiatrist that gave me my first computer book, that's kind of a mentor, someone who believed like, hey, young man, here, maybe you'll be interested in this. And it was a brief encounter, and that's it. He gave me one book, and I still have that book today. Right. And then along the way, either in my own business or at Microsoft in particular, there have been a couple of managers, and really it's a few. It's not like 20 managers, a couple of managers who were just essentially said, I believe in you. What do you need? What do you want to do? I believe in you. And it's been as simple as that, really. And there's certainly people I can go to and ask, oh, what would you do in this situation? But really, that isn't as much as the other one, which is someone just saying, I believe in you, and following it through by giving resources or whatever.
Awesome. How about you?
For me, I would say, I had my grandfather who said that I was different in a positive way. I grew up in low-income housing projects. I grew up in projects, and the picture was kind of painted for young Black girls like me. And my grandfather would speak differently and say I was different, and I was going to be more than where I came from. Where I wish that it was consistent, or where I had this kind of encouragement, was in school. For me, I grew up in the same town that my parents grew up in, and my parents had me in high school. And when I was I think I was going into the 6th or 7th grade, and I was a little younger than everybody else because my mom said I talked too much, so she lied about my age and put me into school. So I was probably about 11 in the 7th grade. So I was a little younger than other folks. And when I came in, I had already known my teacher also taught my mom. So when I walked into the classroom, and one thing about my family, look alike, you can look at us and tell we're part of the same family. So when I walked in, the teacher asked me, which was common, which daughter is your mother? Because my grandparents had 4 girls. So that was always the question that me and my cousins or siblings got. And I said, the baby, I'm her oldest. And she was like, oh yeah, I remember where I had her. So as I walked away to find my seat, I heard her whisper to another teacher, in the classroom that I would be pregnant before I left junior high, is what we called it. And I was at a stage, I'm not even sure I knew how that happened, but I remember it wasn't a positive thing that she said. And it just stung deeply. The good part for me, I am stubborn as heck. So I immediately went, well, you just wait and see. But I also realized not everyone goes there first. So if I wish in the beginning that teachers, folks outside of my family who love me, saw my potential and encouraged that.
Trying to figure out where to go next. Let me go here. So thank you for sharing that, and I'm sorry also that happened, and that's not okay. And we had a conversation last year about how we can raise anti-racist children. And I think that there's a potential for, everybody who's listening to raise, who has children, to raise them in a way where they might say something too, especially the extreme extroverts that have that on the tip of their tongue, and can be an ally in that moment too. So we've talked about some in past episodes. We've talked about systemic barriers and microaggressions and biases, but I want to talk a little bit about what you've experienced in your work, just to give people a sense that perhaps those aren't just as you're rising. You're not experiencing as you're rising, but also as a leader. I think still, I know that when I was an executive, I experienced a ton of microaggressions and systemic barriers and biases. And so could you maybe give an example of what you've experienced as a leader, just so people have a sense of even at the leadership level, what happens?
I can start this one.
Yeah.
I felt that there were other things that got me where I am, right? Like affirmative action, or when I achieved the role that I have today, there were whispers around me being a diversity hire, even though folks understood and knew that I had been an executive for over a decade at a same type financial institution, and that I'm in the middle, I'm writing a dissertation for my doctorate. So education was not a question. Experience was not a question. But me as a Black woman, there has to be another reason that I'm here. And that has been consistent throughout my career. And what I found is, initially, I didn't know how to handle that. It was, and not to say it's still not disturbing or it doesn't hurt. I now understand that that's about the person saying it and not me. So what I had to do was start working on me and healing from all the trauma that I experienced, like the example that I gave you.
Yeah, I'll start this with saying that pretty much any Black person I know of my age has heard this growing up. You need to work twice as hard to get half as much. All right. That's the background that we grow up with. And it prepares you for, our parents are saying that to us because they're trying to prepare us for what we face, right? The reality of the world that we're about to emerge into. And I kept that mantra in the back of my head. And I know the moment I finally let it go and said, I'm good enough. And it was when I was 40 and I was on a beach in Hawaii about to go to India. And this is, you face all sorts of things as you're coming through. And it could be anything from the being passed over for that promotion, which happens all the time. The more common one is you have to train your boss, how to do their job. You're good enough to train your boss, but you're not good enough to be the boss. Happens all the time. What Tonita said about, why am I here? The affirmative action thing, the diversity hire, you're here because you're Black. It's like, I'm here because I'm smart, and I'm probably smarter than you because I grew up with, you have to be twice as smart to get half as much. I am smart. And today, I have a different attitude. In my earlier days, I would take a lot of those aggressions with frustration, perhaps. And I said somewhere that I'm probably slipped more into my Yoda phase than my Samuel L. Jackson phase, So I'm less militant than I was. I'm more Yoda, and I can observe what's happening, to Tonita's point of saying, well, that's you. That has nothing to do with me. I know what I am. I know how good I am. I know what I've done. What have you done? Right? So I look at the aggressions nowadays and I can recognize them for what they are. And it's just a jiu-jitsu or an Aikido game after that. It's like deflect, move around. I now understand how to play the game better because I see what's happening. It's like, oh, I see, you're one of those racist people. Oh, I see, this right here, this is one of those systemic things. Oh, this promotion I didn't get, oh, I get it, because he's your boy. You can see the observation, you can make the observations, and you can not be paralyzed by it, but just move around. It's like, oh, I see, I get the game, right? And I can have a hand in changing the game as well, because I understand what the game is. So I can have, and I've done this, I can take part in changing the game, changing the social constructs, changing the culture, all that sort of stuff, because I understand what's going on. So yeah, those aggressions are out there. It's hard to get rid of it across the board. We're humans and we're always going to do that kind of stuff, but we can be aware that they exist and train ourselves on how to navigate in this environment and float on the wind, if you will.
Can I add to something William said, Melinda? Absolutely, I agree. It is that it's almost like you're in a maze of systemic pressures and microaggressions. And one of the things I remember early in my career, folks who were previous generation would say, well, yeah, that's what I had to deal with. And I get, probably why they said that in the space that they were in, because things were much different then than they are here today. But one of my commitments is to make this place, this world, better than when I arrived. And just to say, well, that's what I dealt with, is just not acceptable to me. Yeah. And I love what you're saying. We understand the game so we can change the game. My kids behind me, the next for generations to come, should not have to deal with the pain and trauma we have had to deal with as we have risen in our career.
Amen to that. And I've actually told younger people, it's like, look, they might be new people into the company and they might be like, oh, this and that and is wrong. And I say, look, I didn't work as hard as I have so that you have to listen to this. Go tell them how you feel, because I created the safe space for you to be able to tell it like it is and be prepared to walk, because you can go get a job over there. Don't be afraid. I did the work so that you don't have to be afraid. So go do what you need to do. Right. And that's, I agree with you 100%. It's like, we got here. It's not, we can't say, well, I got mine.
Yeah.
You're all on your own. Right. It's like, no.
And I would suggest that works for all of us too, that, wherever we are, we don't just say, I've got mine, that we're pulling everybody else up. And as a white woman, pulling up women of color and so on, and really supporting and helping them thrive. And I think that's a great impact that we can all make if we all were to work to make our workplaces better than when we arrived.
Yeah.
What a better place it would be. Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah. Okay, let's do that. So maybe this would be a good segue into how do we do that. So
let's talk a little bit about, I think there's a few things that you both are saying around solutions. One is the systemic issues that we need to change. Another is I do think that recruiting and the work that you're doing, William, there around expanding the market to more places with diversity is really important. And then what we do internally in our cultures to retain. And that actually there's one more of healing I heard in there as well as our own self-healing. And so maybe could we talk maybe about, William, can you talk a little bit about bringing more Black folks in the door and how we kind of begin to support them as leaders as they grow in their careers? And I will say that, I've worked with a lot of tech companies over the years, and recruiting is where they often start. And they come to us. We used to have tech inclusion career fairs, and they'd come and say, well, we need Black senior level talent. It's like, how long have you been working on diversity, equity, and inclusion in your company? Oh, the last year. Well, okay, so the whole tech industry is a little bit like that. So what does that mean? That means that the Black people have been excluded for the last since tech began, more or less. This is a little early in tech. It was a little bit different, but so you're looking for senior level talent when there's been this exclusion. So anyway, if you could talk a little bit about how do we change that piece?
Yeah. Well, there's in 2015, I co-created a program called LEAP, which was about bringing in women and minorities, underrepresented minorities, into our company. And the program is essentially a 16-week apprenticeship, which still runs today and is owned by the HR department. But the essence of it was essentially to find a crack in the system, if you will, and to say, well, normally you just get college hires and they're the only ones that apprentice. And otherwise it's industry hires, which have to have 10 years of experience or whatever. So you're not going to find people who are in between. So this is where the program came in. And the way the program works is the first 4 weeks are essentially, quote, in classroom. And all that means is that we bring them in cohorts. So there might be anywhere from, 30 to 50 of them at a time. And you form a cohort because you're trying to build that social network, right? From day one. Because one of the biggest challenges to any subculture joining a larger culture is that the subculture gets snuffed out because they don't find their footing. So they have to adapt and be absorbed, right? And if they can't, they just get spit out, right? So you bring one person one Black guy from South Carolina and drop them into an all-white male group in, Seattle. You don't tell him where to get the best food that he likes, where to get his hair cut, which neighborhoods are going to be favorable, not even which radio station has the kind of music you want to listen to, and you say, succeed, right? And they're like, and they're out within a year, right? But if I bring 50 of them at once and I let them gel with each other and form a social group, a social network, they're more likely to succeed, right? Because they're a group. They're not just one-offs. They can't be picked off so easily. And they have a stronger voice. And when they're coding on their own or whatever, and they're like, man, I don't want to go to the majority culture and ask for help because they'll think I'm weak. But you can turn to one of your 50 friends because you're all in the same boat and you'll support each other, right? So that's one of those things where we set up, the important thing is setting up the social construct, the social network, so that these people are together rather than one-offs. And that's an important thing. And it goes up to the executive level as well. I've just recently, I've met 4 guys, Black males, brought in senior, and we're all connected, I got connected to them within 2 weeks of them joining, because somebody said, oh, you're a Black guy, you should talk to William. It's like, whatever, we're going to come together. And I now have some Black tech bros for the first time in the company, right? And that's important for their growth, because I can be the old grizzled, veteran going, well, you got to do the following if you're going to get along. And they get to stand on my shoulders instead of just being out there in the wilderness on their own. So you have to do that social network at all levels, right? If you really want those people that you work so hard to get in the door, if you want them to stick around, they need social fabric, right?
Mm-hmm. And it's awesome. This isn't your day job, right? What is your?
No,
I want to just be clear for everybody that, What is your answer to that?
Well, I would say that my day job. Someone described what I do as, oh, you have tenure. And what that means is, and there's no such thing as tenure. Let me be clear. We do not have tenure at Microsoft. But what it means is that I've been there long enough. I have enough credibility. I've done enough positive things, and I continue to do positive things that, yes, I have to do some bread and butter thing, but I'm also allowed to do passion projects, right? And a lot of going into Kenya and Nigeria, that was a passion project. I just went to my boss and said, look, we need engineering over there. Please don't say no. He said, I'm not going to say no. And that was it. Now we have engineering in Africa, right? So doing these things, sometimes it is my job. Like the LEAP program, I started it when I had a day job. But within a couple of cohorts, I said, this has to be a full-time thing. And one of my supporters said, okay, I'll pay your paycheck. Keep doing that, right? So it did become my full-time job for a couple of years. And then I took up these duties of helping our CTO be the CTO. And I do different things. So there's always some engineering thing because I get paid as an engineer. So I have to occasionally show some engineering, right? But I've got enough leeway to do these passion projects because they're beneficial to the company, right?
Awesome. And so Tonita, with your HR background, let's talk about culture and kind of retention and reducing turnover. And what are some of the solutions you see there, especially for Black leaders? And that's what we're focused on here.
Yeah. There's a few things. The first I'll start with that it has to be a culture and a place where people feel like they belong. And many BIPOC people in general, but I know specifically for Black people, we have been taught to assimilate, right? So when we walk in the door, we're not even ourselves from the start, right? So then if the culture is expecting you to assimilate to whatever design they have come up with, then I'm to William's point, I probably last a year or two and then I'm out because I have this internal rage going on because I'm pretending to be someone and
Covering.
Yes. And then the culture is validating that I can't show up as myself. So one, create a culture, no matter what the person's background is, that they can show up as their self. Growing up where I grew up taught me so many valuable lessons and was definitely a part of my journey and how I got to where I am. So if I try to pretend that's not who I am, then it's not going to work out. Two, as companies, as we've talked about, going to these DEI programs, you have to build in healing and care. As we bring up historical issues, as we talk about microaggressions, racism, the system, this is not new for BIPOC people. We know this has happened. We know these things are in place. And it's draining, it's traumatizing. And if we're just constantly throwing this information at folks to change the greater good, it can be damaging to your BIPOC folks. And they will get to a point, and I've even had to check myself in that journey of, I'm tired. I am glad you are on board to change things. But right now, I don't have the energy to hear about your plans or how passionate you are or how disgusted you are with whatever is happening in the world. So how are we taking care of our employees as they are constantly hearing this negative stuff that more than likely is bringing up past things for them and re-traumatizing them?
Yeah.
And then the last thing I would say, equity. Mm-hmm. I don't care what your policies are. I don't care how you think you're hiding salary and benefits. Folks talk. And BIPOC people end up understanding, knowing, finding out that so-and-so, their white colleague makes more than them and has less experience and has even done less for the organization. There is still an issue with pay equity for BIPOC folks in general and for BIPOC women. You can go down each race and ethnicity in the BIPOC realm, and it's terrible compared to what they make versus their colleagues.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't have the statistics offhand, but what we'll do is we'll share some resources in the follow-up, and it'll be on our website once the video and the podcast comes out. So people can learn more about that, because the numbers are pretty significant. They are very significant, and it adds up over your career as well. It's the long-term wealth and intergenerational wealth too that is impacting.
Absolutely.
As well as the personal perception of value and all of that as well.
And I just want to add, the pay inequity not only negatively impacts BIPOC folks, it impacts all of us. That is wealth that's not being put back into our economy. So to pay fair and with equitable practices, we all benefit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this gets, you started to go into this a bit around healing, the importance of healing, but I want to ask you both, there's been a new, I wouldn't say a new focus, but a wider focus, a broader focus on race and improving diversity, equity, and inclusion for Black people in particular since George Floyd was murdered. How has this impacted you, honestly? And has this led to the systemic change that we need?
I will go first.
Go ahead.
The George Floyd, there's so much wrapped up in that particular incident. First, for most Black folks, well, first of all, it's a grotesque moment in time, right? And what made it grotesque is that we're all home for the pandemic and we're all on our screens and YouTube is live and everyone has 4K HD cell phones capturing the event. So you couldn't avoid it, right? Now, for a lot of white people and others, I heard colleagues say, that's the first time I've ever known that there was any problem. It's like, okay, so you've been walking through, maybe watching too many Jeopardy episodes rather than seeing what's going on in the world. For a lot of Black people, it's like, they got another one. He's not the first one that year. He wasn't the last. And in the last 400 years, he's just one of a million. We had a whole city wiped out by white folks, and the history books didn't even blink. So, there's that. But for me as a Black person, another thing happened, which was activation. I was already on a path of trying to do things, and I had that leap behind me, and I was woke at that point. Even before that happens, like, what can I do? I got to give back. I'm getting older, tail ending my career. It's time to start giving back. That helped crystallize it, and I put a number on it. Most immediately I said, all right, I'm going to spend $100,000 on investing in Black businesses. That's where I started. And I've continued to say, I want to help develop Black businesses because that's important, right? And it's something I can do, not because I'm a multimillionaire, but because I've had all this experience of my life that I can now help apply the next level. LEAP was one level of thing. Now there's this business level of thing. And then the last thing, and there's so many things, but the last thing I'll mention is the effect it had on me and this goes back to something Tonita kind of alluded to, is how I responded to my white colleagues. It wasn't all white colleagues. It was some of them were just from different countries, typically Asian. And the whole, I'm sorry, you must feel this, and I feel awful that. And I was like, don't feel sorry for me. I'm not the one with the problem here. Black people aren't the ones that have the problem. We're the ones being killed, right? We don't have the problem. You have the problem. You guys are sick and you need to heal yourselves. We're here to help you, but you're the ones that need to heal. And that was the final thing for me. And people would want me to come and talk to their group about how it felt being Black and all this nice. And I would just tell people, I am not a monkey in a zoo. You don't get to observe me and walk away without sharing your own emotional journey, because that's not fair. And I won't be observed. I've been observed long enough. You need to start doing some work. So if you want to have an honest conversation where we're both vulnerable and our emotions are raw, great. We'll have that conversation and we'll help the healing between us. But other than that, I'm weary. I'm done. I don't have time for you. You guys have been doing this long enough. You need to figure out what your problem is, right? Those are all the things that came out of George Floyd for me.
I almost felt like I wanted to be in church and amen you.
Can I get an amen?
I guess I can pick up now. I'm sorry, I got so engrossed.
The collection plate will be coming around.
For me, much like William, I really felt that I was in a space trying to change things, right? And my family would say to me, my Southern family, like, "Woo, girl, your mouth is going to get you in trouble," those type of things, right? So I thought I was there until that happened. I had also recently made a transition where all three of my sons, I have 3 sons and 1 daughter, were adults. And right a couple months before George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery happened. And I have athletic boys that'll go for a run. And my world was just rocked in a different way, because when I saw these things through this lens as a mom, I had seen things my whole life, but now I'm a mom and I just was grappling with, I have very little control over what they do now, right? When they were young, I could kind of sort of protect them, but now that they're grown men, it's up to them. And the worry that came over me was just overwhelming. Second, I realized how much I had pushed down that happened to me, that I hadn't ever talked about, that I hadn't dealt with. And I just had this immense anger that, and I will tell you what did it for me was the smile on the officer's face. That just brought up everything that I didn't remember, I thought I was hiding, or that I was pushing down. And I made a commitment that I was going to show up as my authentic self with my worries, concerns, not just as a mom, but as a Black mom of Black men, and my hurts, my anger, in a way that was healthy. So what that meant for me is I needed help to deal with that. That was decades and decades of stuff that I just pushed down. For my own healing, I realized there was healing I had to do, because if I did not, I was going to lose it and snap on someone any day with all the teach me. And some folks who even with my background said it was my responsibility to help bring people along. No, it's not. No, it's not. Or tell the history. No, that's what Google is for. You can Google just like I can. I'm not going to do that, but I had to figure out how to do that in a way that I wasn't damaging myself or damaging any progress that my organization was making. So that's what came up for me. It was really centered on me as a mother because I saw my sons, and to hear someone cry out for their moms, and I have 3 mama's boys, they won't say it, but everybody else will tell you they are. It just broke my heart. And everything that I had pushed down regarding that, I realized I had to do something about that and deal with that. And I want to bring that point up because it's really important that we as BIPOC people take care of ourselves. If you're BIPOC and you navigate this United States, you have trauma and you need to deal with the trauma or it's going to eat at you. And that can impact your health. It can impact how you show up. It can impact your goals. This country has told us that we're not a priority. It's time for us to make ourselves a priority.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, is for me at least, is that a lot of not a lot, I don't want to overblow it, but a lot of Black history in the last, let's just call it 40, 50 years, has been handout. You know, you owe me. And I think we're done with that. I think we have to move to a state of we're going to do for ourselves. Right. I think it's very important that professionals like ourselves should be standing up and going, all right, we got some sports millionaires and billionaires over there. We got some music people over there. We got some more athletes. We got some tech people. We got some CEOs and whatnot. We have the brain trust. We have money. We have ideas. We need to start setting our own path and not just waiting for the rest of society to bring us along, because we know how that goes. We have 400 years of how that goes. It's time for us to just stand up and say, all right, this is what we're going to do. Right? Because the society around us is going to educate itself at its own pace. And the world isn't always fair. And, you know, it's not always equitable, but we have the means whereby we can start setting our own path as much as we can, and working with purpose.
What I hear you saying, William, is we have to understand our own worth and power. And sometimes I believe we don't.
We don't. Right.
We think we have to get permission. And no, we don't. No, we don't.
Exactly. And it takes people, I mean, you're a CEO of a company. It's like, there's plenty of people who can look at you and go, oh, I didn't know we could do that. Right. It's like, yep, we sure can. And let me show you how. Right.
Right.
So, yeah.
Thank you both for sharing that. And I think what I hear as a white person there is that we have a lot of work to do. Obviously, I know that, and I have known that for a long time, and I've been working on it for a long time. And for everybody who's listening, we all have a lot of work to do. And we, as managers, as leaders in companies, it's really important to recognize that it's going to happen again. There is going to be, and then there is regularly violence against Black people, injustice against Black people, and so it's important to support folks. It's important to have those mental health resources in your company. It's important to recognize that this is happening and not just be self-centered in that space, right? It's really important to recognize and have empathy for folks as they experience that, and so many of the different ways that you talked about. We're running short on time. We have 2 questions, and questions from folks wanting to create change. And so Jerica asks, in discussions around DEI at work, they're really focused on being 100% inclusive. So not leaving out the 60% of the room that are still cis white men, and which bothered her and bothered them. And what are your thoughts around engaging white men meaningfully and helping trigger aha moments for those folks? Because I'm sure both of you have done some of that.
I can start.
Yeah.
If you know, it's a difficult road, Erica, because just the way this country has been built is to protect white men and their feelings and their power, right? And how you start with that is dismantling that power in that systemic way and allow the emotions to happen. I've had some powerful conversations with white males who have said to me, "What do you mean I grew up poor?" Okay, let's talk about what that meant for you versus me as a Black person. And you got to have those discussions. And then on the other side of it, it's really up to them what they do with it. And sometimes it means what you're doing is weeding those folks who can't be brought along out. And that's okay. And I think companies who like to center what I call is the fragility that's sitting in that room often can't reach their full potential because you're allowing that to hold you back. You got to go for it. It's going to be tough. There's going to be people angry and upset, and you let them be. And hopefully they go on a healthy journey to understand why they're so upset. And then if they can't do that, have a nice life. Bye. Right? Because they're
don't get stuck there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to add this a comment that Emily made in the chat about our company, our organization, Microsoft, invested in inclusion. And that's exactly right. And that's what is applied here. Because when you look on a global scale, Microsoft's a global company. Here in America, it's all about women, Hispanics, Black, Native Americans, and Pacific Islanders. Those are the top hits, right? That's where you're trying to get in the door because those are the classically underrepresented minorities. When you go to Nigeria, forget all that, everyone's Black. So it's about women and it's about certain tribals, right? When you go to India, again, it's about tribals. It's not about, there's no white men, there's no Black people. I mean, there's plenty of dark-skinned people, they don't call them Black, but, so you have to just recognize that the real game is about how do you include more voices at the table, because that's going to make your company stronger. So it's really about an inclusion game. It just gets hyper-focused here in the US about the Black thing because we have such strong history on that particular axis, and that's why we're focused on it. But really, it's about inclusion and just asking yourself. So those white males who were threatened, or those males who were threatened in Nigeria, you just ask them, we want to make a better product by including more voices in the product development. That's the game right there. And it's about convincing those people. And like Tonita said, some people, they're just not going to be convinced. Like, look, I got my privilege. I don't want to give it up. Right. It's like, all right, you're off the boat. I'm going to find the guy who's willing to share because we want to make the boat stronger. Right. And that's just the way it goes. And if they want to go down the hill, singing the flag, raising the flag of exclusion, so be it. Right. Hopefully we end up in a world that says, wow, that was an anachronistic point in history where we used to do stuff like that. Yeah. And now we don't. Right. Yeah. So that's all I wanted to say about it.
Yeah. we didn't get to another question here, Emily, sorry. But hopefully we'll be able to address it in the future. One last kind of very quick question. I always end by asking our audience to commit to taking action. So for each of you, what is one action you'd like people to take after listening or watching?
For me, what I would like you to do is self-care. Make sure you are taking care of yourself in the way that you're able to do it, you can afford to do it. I would ask you to create a plan, to have a executive coach, a therapist, or yoga or something. How many minutes and hours can you dedicate to becoming your whole self and heal from your past trauma? That's what I ask you to do.
Mine would be go read a book from a culture that you're not used to. My favorite one, if you were reading about Black culture in America, would be Black folk tales, because you'll hear about High John the Conqueror and Stagger Lee and all sorts of Bear Rabbit and all sorts of other fun things. So that would be my commandment, very short. It's like, go read a book from a culture you're not used to, because you'll learn a lot about that culture.
Awesome. Thank you both. Really appreciate this. And I'm sure you're seeing the chat too. People are really appreciating this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah. And thank you all for participating in the chat, for being here, for your questions. Thank you again to First Tech Federal Credit Union for your sponsorship. And just a few last things for continued learning. Last year, we had an incredible panel of Black folks who shared what they want from allies during Black History Month. So you can check that episode 32 at ally.cc. And we've also addressed Black mental health, the emotional tax, the effects of racism on Black men and boys, in particular, intergenerational trauma, and more. So there's lots of ways to deepen your learning through reading and also through listening and watching other episodes at ally.cc. So thank you all. Happy Black History Month. Please do the work and take care of yourselves while doing it. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
To learn more about this episode's topic, visit ally.cc. Allyship is a journey. It's a journey of self-exploration, learning, unlearning, healing, and taking consistent action. And the more we take action, the more we grow as leaders and transform our communities. So what action will you take today? Please share your actions and learning with us by emailing podcast@changecatalyst.co or on social media, because we'd love to hear from you. And thank you for listening. Please subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel and share this. Let's keep building allies around the world. Leading with Empathy and Allyship is an original show by Change Catalyst, where we build inclusive innovation through training, consulting, and events. Appreciate you listening to our show and taking action as an ally. See you next week.